My name is David Duffield, and I am Denver.
My name is Jessica Lahore, and I am Denver.
My name is Scotty Carlisle, and I am Denver.
I am Anthony Aragon. I am Denver.
My name is DiMarcio, and I am Denver.
My name is Morgan Taylor. I am Denver.
My name is Evie Audley, and I am Denver.
Welcome to the Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee meeting of Denver City Council. Full coverage of this session of the Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee begins now.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Tuesday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day. I am Councilwoman Amanda Sandoval, Chair of the LUDI Committee, and we will start. No one's online yet, so we will introduce them when they come. So I will start to my right.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Chris Arnon, District 8.
Good morning, Joel Clark, District 7.
Good morning, Jamie Torres, District 3.
Good morning, Kendra Black, District 4.
Good morning, Paul Cashman, South Denver, District 6.
Thank you. We have two action items in front of us today. 0121, I think it's Fran. So go ahead, Fran, with your presentation and just please introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning, members of City Council. My name is Fran Peñafiel, and I'm a senior city planner with Community Planning and Development, and today I'm going to present an overview of the rezoning for 1085 Knox Court. So let's start with the request. This application came to us from an applicant that is requesting to change the zoning classification for 1085 Knox Street from ESUD1X, which is a single unit residential district, to URH 2.5, that is a multi-unit residential district. URH 2.5 allows for the urban house, the detached accessory dwelling unit building form, duplexes, tandem houses, and the row house building form. The subject property is located in Council District 3 in the Villa Park neighborhood. The subject property is located near the southwest corner of West 12th Avenue and Knox Court. The Lakewood Dry Gulch Park is north of the property, running east-west, and Paco Sanchez Park is 200 feet northeast from the subject site. The subject site is within the quarter-mile buffer of the Knox Street RTD light rail station. The property is currently in the Urban Edge single unit D1X zone district, which in this location would allow for the suburban house, urban house, and detached accessory dwelling unit building forms in a minimum zone lot size of 6,000 square feet. And as you can see in this map, the property is surrounded by other properties also zoned ESUD1X to the north and south, and there is ERH 2.5 to the east and west. The current land use of the site is single unit residential, and it is mostly surrounded by other single unit uses and multi-unit residential uses directly to the west. There are also some commercial retail uses along 10th Avenue. This slide shows the subject property is located in a residential area in very close proximity to the Knox Street RTD station and gives an idea of the character of the neighborhood. In the top left image, you can see the subject property, and in the bottom left image, which is looking north to Knox Court, you can see how close the site is to the station. Now that we understand the context and location, let's take a quick look at the process. Informational notice of the application was sent on October 12, 2022. Planning Board voted 7-1 to recommend approval of on the February 1st public hearing. City Council public hearing is tentatively set for March 28, 2023. And to date, staff has received 1 letter of opposition and 1 letter in support from 2 of the RNOs in the area. The Villa Park Neighborhood Association expressed concerns with the potential involuntary displacement that the proposed rezoning could cause in the neighborhood. Strong Denver sent a letter of support, and the applicant also provided 5 letters of support from community members that were attached to the application. Now moving on to our last section, the review criteria. For a rezoning to be approved by City Council, it must be found that the requested map amendment is consistent with 5 review criteria. Our role as staff planners is to evaluate the requested district, in this case the URH 2.5, against these 5 criteria. The first criterion is consistency with adopted plans. There are 5 plans. So there's 4 approved plans, but we're also going to take a really quick look at West, because West is coming pretty soon to you, so we wanted to make sure we acknowledge that plan, but that plan is not approved yet. Let's start with Comprehensive Plan 2040. As stated in the staff report, the rezoning is consistent with several goals in the Comprehensive Plan 2040. This map amendment will promote equity by creating a greater mix of housing options in every neighborhood, and it will lead to an environmentally resilient Denver by promoting infill development where infrastructure and services are already in place. Now, Blueprint Denver shows us that the subject property is mapped as part of the urban neighborhood context, and that's why the applicant is requesting to rezone to urban context instead of the urban edge that they currently have. The Future Places map designates the subject site as part of the high-medium place type. These place types have a mix of mid-scale multi-unit residential buildings, usually mixed with a variety of lower-scale residential building types. The proposed URH 2.5 zone district, allowing multiple building forms up to 2.5 stories in height, is compatible with this future place type. Knox Court is a residential collector, which are mostly characterized by residential uses, but might also include schools, civic uses, parks, small retail nodes, and other similar uses. The growth area in Blueprint Denver is all other areas of the city. These areas are anticipated to see a 10% employment growth and 20% housing growth by 2040. Blueprint Denver also includes specific policy recommendations. Housing Goal 2 focuses on diversifying housing options by exploring opportunities to integrate missing middle housing into low and low-medium residential areas, especially those that score low in housing diversity. This rezoning to a row house zone district will have minimal impact on the character of the surrounding neighborhood, and it's consistent with Blueprint Denver recommendations. Given that the subject site is within one of Denver's neighborhood equity and stabilization focused neighborhoods, an equity analysis was included with the staff report and was shared with the applicant for consideration. Blueprint Denver contains 3 equity concepts to help guide change to benefit everyone. Each equity concept has associated measurements that help inform implementation actions. The subject property is in the Villa Park, which is identified as an area with less access to opportunity compared to the rest of the city. The subject area is less equitable than Denver as a whole when it comes to access to fresh foods and healthcare. These scores are related to a higher than average percentage of children with obesity and poverty line. While the proposed allowance of a multi-unit residential development does not directly increase access to opportunity, an increase in residents might increase the likelihood that more goods, services, and amenities will be located in the commercial and mixed-use zone areas of the neighborhood. Additionally, the proposed zone district would allow additional housing units at a location that is well served by transit, providing residents with additional access to daily needs. The subject site is in an area that has high vulnerability to involuntary displacement. The subject area scored as vulnerable to displacement in 2 of the 3 categories: educational attainment and medium household income. The proposed rezoning to allow for a multi-unit residential development intended to offer for-sale units will provide opportunity for home ownership and help keep existing residents in the neighborhood. This proposed rezoning would allow for additional residential units in the area, which can help provide housing for existing residents and contribute to meeting the citywide demands for housing. The subject property is an area that has low housing diversity. The subject area is not diverse in terms of the percentage of owners to renters, number of income-restricted units, and housing costs. Adding missing middle housing is a strategy to add needed housing diversity. The neighborhood lacks smaller-scale multi-unit developments compared to the rest of the city and does not offer a diversity of housing costs when compared to Denver average. The proposed rezoning will help diversify the housing stock and encourage a mix of residential development types available. Now let's take a look at the Villa Park Neighborhood Plan from 1991. A quick note here on the next 2 plans that we're gonna see. So we're gonna look at Villa Park and West Colfax. The draft West Area Plan is intended to supersede the Villa Park Neighborhood Plan and the West Colfax Plan. However, given the timing of this application, the relevant plan guidance is addressed in the staff report. And that means we will be reviewing these 2 plans, and these are the ones that we really need to pay attention to. The proposed zone district allows development that is similar in scale to the existing pattern, while allowing additional density and investment along the light rail line, which was developed after adoption of the Villa Park Plan. The proposed URH 2.5 zone district complies with the land use and zoning visions of the Villa Park Neighborhood Plan in terms of protecting the residential character of the neighborhood. The plan recommendation discouraging higher density development predated the public investment in the development of the adjacent light rail line and the development of more current land use recommendations in Blueprint Denver and the West Colfax Plan. The URH 2.5 zone district is a district that both respects the character of the existing neighborhood in terms of building height and residential land use types, and allows for a reasonable increase in density given the location of the property in close proximity to the Knox Street light rail station. Now, the West Colfax Plan is from 2006. On the future land use concept map of the properties are identified as urban neighborhood station, which is described as single-family and multifamily residential with a typical scale of 1 to 5 stories. The urban neighborhood station land use development pattern occurs within a quarter to a half-mile radius of the light rail station. Since the stations evolve in established residential areas, initial changes might add density and intensity in compact building forms that blend in with the prevailing residential context. Development might progress initially from residential additions and rehabilitation to the addition of carriage houses and conversion of single-family structures to duplex, triplex, and quads. The proposed zoning for the subject site, URH 2.5, will increase the range of residential housing types and will control the scale of future development to the same scale as the surrounding residential development and is consistent with the West Colfax Plan. As mentioned before, the draft West Area Plan is not yet adopted, but we thought it would be important to take a look and make sure that we comply with that plan. The draft area plan is currently planned for adoption in spring of 2023 as part of the Community Planning and Development Neighborhood Planning Initiative, and it will supersede the Villa Park Neighborhood Plan and the West Colfax Plan. It will also update the guidance in Comprehensive Plan 2040 and Blueprint Denver. Within the West Area Plan, the subject property is within the urban neighborhood context, and in the Future Places map, it's classified as community corridor. And I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. I put local center, but it is community corridor. Community corridor allows for up to 5 stories in this area. The proposed URH 2.5 zone district allows for multiple residential building forms up to 2.5 stories in height. Therefore, the proposed URH 2.5 zone district is consistent with the direction given in the West Area Plan. Now moving on to criteria 2 and 3, staff also finds that the requested rezoning meets the next two criteria. The rezoning will result in uniformity of district regulations, and it will further the public health, safety, and welfare, primarily through its implementation of adopted land use plans. The proposed rezoning would also facilitate increased housing density near services and amenities and promote walkable urban neighborhood within walking distance to public transit. The application identifies the changing conditions north of the property along the West Corridor light rail line as a justifying circumstance. There has been increased development in the Villa Park and West Colfax neighborhoods, and significant investment in infrastructure has occurred around the Knox RTD light rail station. This increase in the intensity of land use in the area has created additional need for higher intensity residential uses, like those allowed in the URH 2.5 zone district. Also, as discussed before, Blueprint Denver mapped this site as high-medium future place type, consistent with the proposed URH 2.5. Therefore, the proposed map amendment is justified in order to recognize the changes and changing conditions of the land. Lastly, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the urban neighborhood context, row house, 2.5 zone district, purpose and intent. Staff does recommend the Commission move the application forward to full City Council consideration based on finding all review criteria has been met.
Thank you so much, Fran. I appreciate the thorough presentation. We have one speaker in the queue so far. President Torres, go ahead with your questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Fran. A couple things. Steve, are you here on behalf of the applicant? Might be questions for you, if you wouldn't mind coming up. The letters of support, so I did read the notes about the Villa Park RNO meeting. On that one, split vote 3-4, 3 in support, 4 opposed. Were there things that were discussed in that meeting that you can share that related to kind of how you talked through equity or access issues?
And Steve, before you start, you have to introduce yourself and your address for the record.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Steve Ferris, 820 South Fillmore Street is my address. We met with the Villa Park Neighborhood Association, 3 times, maybe 4, virtually and in person. And we could see, even as a board, there was some internal struggle about how they felt about the rezoning. They kind of recognized there was plan support, and yet there was this, I think, understandable, maybe a fear that this type of activity created gentrification opportunities, and maybe what wasn't really what they were in support of. And I sympathize with that. We did, but we also felt like this area is next to a light rail, and felt like maybe it was a great place for just more density. And we also felt like we were doing for sale opportunities. This house is being converted from a single family to a triplex row home. And these will be relatively affordable homes. They will be free market, but they're opportunities for people who live there and for people who don't live there, is the idea. And we hope we struck a balance there.
Sorry, I'm pulling up maybe what you've got planned. So you said triplex, so 3 homes is what you're anticipating?
Yes.
Okay. This is not on the corner, and it's one house in from the corner, and that works in terms of the amount of space that you've got there?
That zoning would allow, yes.
Okay.
For that size lot.
Right. I didn't see, did I hear reference to letters of support other than RNOs?
Yes, we have, there's about 6 or 7, I forget the final number, that's in the file, from folks who live in the neighborhood. The applicant lives in Villa Park as well,
okay.
and the owner, so there, maybe count their votes too, but there is broad support, and we know that RNO it's a difficult job. They do their best.
Okay, thank you. So I am seeing them now, the individual folks. So those are neighbors to the house?
I don't know if they're neighbors directly to this house. I know they're neighbors to the applicant who lives in the neighborhood too. I'm not sure exactly. They're in Villa Park. The addresses are all.
How did conversations go with neighbors to the property?
We weren't able to reach them. We tried to, and there was no response.
Okay, how did you try?
Knocked on the doors,
Okay.
essentially, and just checked.
Okay. The other RNO that provided a letter of support, who are they? Strong Denver? I'm
Yeah.
sorry?
Citywide, it's a RNO.
It's a citywide RNO? Okay. I went to their website. There's no public meeting information. Like who are members of the RNO?
I don't know. They did ask for a meeting. They're listed on the CPD's website of all applicable
Did you
RNO.
present to them, to a group
I
of?
did not present, but I
Okay.
sent them an email and described what we were doing.
And based on that, they gave you a letter of support?
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Fran, I do have a question for you. In the comments in the staff report, Development Services commented that that this is correcting neighborhood context from E to U. Is that correcting just a typographical error, or is this area misclassified as neighborhood context?
No, it's not misclassified.
Okay.
I think that's, like that. I'm gonna check who put that comment, like what department, but it used to be classified, like it's still classified E, it's only that Blueprint Denver has it recommended as U. So that's why we think that going to urban is more appropriate, but it's not like we're changing the context.
Okay.
For the whole area. Just if they rezone, we think it's more appropriate to go with urban because that's a recommendation from Blueprint.
If they rezone?
Yeah.
Okay, so what about the other properties? I'm looking at, it looks like anything that's gone to RH 2.5 has been changed to Urban Edge.
So I think, and I was looking at that, I think that the one to the west that is E, that one was rezoned a while ago. So I think that one was rezoned either right at the change of Blueprint Denver or right before. That one was done by Teresa a long time ago. So that's why it probably went to Urban Edge, because we didn't have the Blueprint guidance that tells us that it should be urban.
Do you know offhand what the differences are between ERH 2.5 and URH 2.5 in terms of either building form or setbacks, or what changes?
I don't think that there's any changes with setbacks or my guess is that Urban Edge is going to allow for the suburban building form. If they wanted to do like a
single house
unit house, they could do urban and suburban. The Urban Edge is not going to allow it. It's only going to allow for the urban house and like the other building forms in the RH. But I can confirm that. Get back to you, like to see if there's any substantial change.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So, Fran, my questions were similar to President Torres, that I guess I just don't understand CPD's. It's been happening in the Sunnyside neighborhood where rezonings prior to 2019 have a different context. And so we're not making it uniform. And so I don't quite understand that philosophy. I understand that we're going to Blueprint Denver is the top plan, right? Because that's all we have, because the West Area Plan. But even the West Area Plan goes to Planning Board tomorrow.
Yeah.
So in the West Area Plan, if we were looking at the West Area Plan, would it still recommend the urban context instead of the E?
Yeah.
So even within the West Area Plan, and it only happens if upon rezoning. So everybody else still gets to have the E, which does have a suburban house, and then the U does not. It allows an urban house. So I think that's the biggest, like when you were talking about forms in the zone district, that's the biggest differentiator.
Yeah,
right?
and again, I'm going to double check that there's no other changes that I'm missing, but as far as I know, it's just the suburban building form that it's not allowed in the urban context. And so as I was saying, like the NPI is going to update Blueprint. So in theory, it should, and again, Blueprint is calling for urban here. But because before the older Blueprint version had this area be Urban Edge, because probably before the station was there, this was considered a little bit less urban, a little bit more suburban, right? But with the station and everything, this area now, it's going to be called for more intensity. And that's why also like here in Knox, we see like that it's even suggested in the NPI that it should be commercial and residential. So we really expect to see higher intensity in this area near the station.
On Knox?
Yeah.
Yeah, the little commercial note on Knox?
Yeah.
Yeah, within the plan. Okay. Hey, Steve, I have a question for you. So the owner lives in Villa Park over on Tennyson. So is this a rental that he has currently?
You know, I don't know if he rents or owns the place he resides in. I
No,
just don't-
the
just-
property that was
Oh,
under
it's vacant.
rezoning
It's
right now?
vacant right now.
It's vacant?
Yeah.
So nobody lives there?
That's correct.
Okay. And you personally went and knocked on the doors?
I did, no, he did. He said he did.
Okay. And has he ever lived there?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Okay. I have no other questions. Seeing no other questions, do we have a motion to move 0121 forward? We have a motion by Councilman Herndon and a second by President Torres. Seeing no any objections? And I'd like to welcome Councilwoman Sita Baca. She's joined us virtually. Seeing no other questions, we'll see you in front of City Council. Thank you, Fran. Next up, we have 0122, and Fran again gets to present to it with us.
Okay, good morning again. Fran Peñafiel, Senior City Planner with Community Planning and Development. And now I'm going to present an overview of the rezoning request for 3401 West 29th Avenue and 2945 North Julian Street. Let's start with the request. This is an applicant-driven application requesting to change the zoning classification for two adjacent sites, one at 3401 West 29th Avenue and the second one at 2945 North Julian Street. The property at 3401, here it is the map. The property at 3401 West 29th Avenue is occupied by a one-story building built in 1924 as a church. The property on 2945 North Julian Street was built as a one-story mid-century church in 1955. Both buildings are contributing structures in the Allen M. Ghost Historic Landmark District, which means there are significant protections in place to preserve the existing structures. The applicant is requesting the rezoning to facilitate the redevelopment of the properties that is consistent with the recommendations of the adopted plans. The subject property is located in Council District 1 in the West Highland neighborhood. As mentioned before, the subject properties are currently zoned USUB, and I didn't mention that before. They are zoned USUB, which is a single unit residential district allowing urban houses with a minimum soil lot size of 4,500 square feet. The surrounding properties are zoned USUB1 and USUA1, which are residential protected districts. If the subject properties are rezoned to UMX2X, they will be subject to all protected district standards, including additional setbacks and use limitations. According to our records, the current land use of the sites is public quasi-public. While the structures were built as churches, the buildings have not been used as such for a few years. Instead, they have been used for neighborhood services like music school, charter, preschool, therapy practice, yoga studio, and a massage studio. The properties have also hosted many community events. The subject properties are part of the Allen M. Ghost Historic Landmark District. Given that both buildings are contributing structures in this landmark district, there are significant protections. These protections ensure the historical, architectural, geographical, and cultural importance of these structures are protected through landmark design and demolition review. This slide shows what the subject sites look like. The buildings are separated by an alley and embedded in an established residential neighborhood. And here I included some photos of the houses in the surrounding blocks. Now let's take a look at the process. Informational notice of the application was sent on November 15, 2022. Planning Board recommended approval unanimously on February 1st, 2023. And currently, City Council public hearing is tentatively set for April 3rd, 2023. To date, staff has received one letter of support from Strong Denver, a citywide registered neighborhood association, and one letter of opposition from a neighbor who expressed concerns that the development of these sites will increase traffic, decrease available parking, decrease safety, increase crime, noise, and pests. Also, we received another letter of support from another, I don't know, I'm missing the name.
West Highland Neighborhood.
West Highland, yes, I'm sorry,
No problem.
forgot to update it because we got that letter just this week. The applicant went through a 2-year community engagement process with neighbors and the RNO and finally came to an agreement. The applicant will be able to answer any questions because they have a covenant with the RNO. So if you have any questions on that, I'm sure the applicant will be happy to answer any of those questions. Now moving to the review criteria. For rezoning to be recommended for approval by Planning Board, it must be found that the requested map amendment is consistent with 5 review criteria found on the Denver Zoning Code. The first criteria is consistency with adopted plans, and here we have 2 plans. We have Comprehensive Plan and Blueprint Denver. Let's start with Comprehensive Plan. Stated in the staff report, the rezoning is consistent with several goals in the Comprehensive Plan 2040. The requested map amendment will enable adaptive reuse of a structure at an infill location where services and infrastructures are already in place. The requested UMX2X zone district broadens the variety of uses, allowing residents to live, work, and play in an area well served by transportation mobility options. Therefore, the rezoning is consistent with Denver Blueprint, with Denver Comprehensive Plan 2040 recommendations. Now, Blueprint Denver. The subject properties are mapped as part of the urban neighborhood context in Blueprint Denver. The subject properties are mapped as residential low in the future place map. The residential low classification includes land uses and built forms that are predominantly 1 and 2 units, though many areas are mostly 1 unit, though many areas are mostly 1 units. Neighborhood serving retail might be found in some key locations, and where limited mixed use can occur along arterials and collector streets, as well as where commercial uses have been already established. Vacant institutional uses on corners or selected sites might be appropriate locations to introduce additional residential intensity. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the Future Places map because the subject site has historically been non-residential. It's embedded in 1 unit and 2 unit residential area and is located along an arterial street. The proposed UMX2X zone district is a mixed-use zone district that is calibrated for neighborhood serving retail. The subject properties are located within the all other areas of the city, which are anticipated to see around 20% new housing growth and 10% new employment growth by 2040. The proposed map amendment to UMX2X is consistent with this map because it will enable compatible adaptive reuse of an existing structure for the location to support continued viability of the existing building. Blueprint Denver has additional specific policies that are applicable to this request. The proposed rezoning is consistent with these Blueprint Denver policies because it will facilitate adaptive reuse of 2 important historic structures by allowing additional compatible uses. Now moving on to criteria 2 and 3, staff also finds that the requested rezoning meets the next 2 criteria. The rezoning will result in uniformity of district regulations, and it will further the public health and safety and welfare, primarily through its implementation of adopted land use plans. The proposed UMX2X zone district will allow for redevelopment in a manner that will preserve the existing structures while providing additional neighborhood serving amenities, thereby providing residents more opportunities to live, work, and play within the neighborhood. The application identifies the changing conditions such as adopted plans as the justifying circumstance. As discussed above, Blueprint Denver provides new guidance that encourages individual rezonings to institutional uses to facilitate adaptive reuse. The plan was adopted after the date of approval of the existing zone district. There has also been redevelopment in the Sloan Lake and West Highland neighborhoods, and significant investment in infrastructure has occurred on West 29th Avenue in the form of new bike lanes extending from Sheridan Boulevard to downtown Denver. This increase in the intensity of land use in the area has created additional need for neighborhood serving commercial services like those allowed in the UMX2X zone district. These change and changing conditions make continued commercial uses appropriate on this site. Therefore, the proposed map amendment is justified in order to recognize the change and changing conditions. Lastly, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the urban neighborhood context, mixed-use 2X zone district purpose and intent. Staff does recommend the Commission move the application forward to full City Council consideration based on finding all review criteria has been met.
Thank you, Fran, for the thorough presentation. I don't see any speakers in the queue. Just want to say, oh, are you afraid? No, go ahead. Go ahead, President Torres.
Okay, just a quick question about the covenant that applies to this. If anyone can speak to what that contained in terms of uses.
And before you answer, just introduce yourself for the record.
Hello, members of council. Bruce O'Donnell, 825 Spear Boulevard in Denver, and I'm the applicant representative. And I'm sorry, Councilman Torres, I'm not sure I heard the question exactly.
The question is about the covenant and what that contained in terms of uses for the property.
Sure. So the covenant does a number of things. One is that it limits the number of uses that would otherwise be permitted in the zoning to a very narrow list of uses that the neighbors felt were compatible and that they'd be pleased to live nearby. And so they're primarily residential uses, and then some limited uses, food and beverage operation, that type of thing, no intense commercial uses. And then the covenant goes beyond things, uses, beyond things that are identified in zoning, and puts further restrictions on the property. So for example, I said food and beverage, I apologize. Eating and drinking establishment is limited to a total of 1,200 square feet in the building, and hours of operation are limited. If a liquor license is pursued, it can only be beer and wine, those type of things that the neighbors are all on board with.
Okay. The two buildings that are there, are they protected, or would you just be reusing the existing buildings?
So both buildings are contributing structures in the landmark district.
Okay.
And so any exterior modification would have to go before the Landmark Preservation Commission. And while some, sprucing up and renovation is anticipated, no changes to the buildings are identified.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just want to go on record and say that these are issues that we face in Northwest Denver and throughout Denver. Not long ago, there was an application for a church that came before us that had a PUD. And so I don't think that there's consistency within our planning department on what to do with these historic churches on corners that are embedded in residential districts. Each one acts unique in its use and its need and how it interfaces with the community. And in my experience being behind this dais for 3.5 years, I've seen them come as planned unit developments because they're historic structures, and this one has a standard zone district that took a lot of negotiating on behalf of the applicant almost for 2 years. And so I would just hope that as we move forward with our adaptive reuse project that CPD is exploring in East Denver, that we also start taking a look at these churches, because this is I have tons of churches throughout my council district, and a lot of them are in historic districts, or they could actually qualify for historic designation, and it leaves them vacant. It leaves them not being used, which leads to other activities in our neighborhoods that the owners have to deal with. So I know this application meets all of the criteria, and I want to just thank the applicant for taking as much time as you did to meet with a group of concerned residents near here. But my plea is just to have CPD create a more streamlined process when it comes to these applications of churches that are in a single unit district that are historic in nature. They don't have parking, they can't have parking, and every time a use is changed, it puts burden on the person who's actually getting the change of use, because they have to go through different processes because it's a standard zone district. So I know that I'm preaching to the choir, and I know, Fran, thank you so much for your work. This is not directed at you. It's just a higher policy concern that's throughout Denver, because we have churches that are, tons of churches throughout Denver that are just not being utilized as churches like they are. So what is their future look like? And every single time I've rezoned a church in Northwest Denver, it's taken a 2-year process because there's negotiation with the neighborhoods, and that's just not fair. It's not fair on the applicant, and it's not fair on the neighborhood, and it's not fair on the council person. So I just hope that one day we can have a bigger conversation about these churches that are embedded in these neighborhoods throughout Denver. Seeing no other questions and no, yep, President Torres?
Sorry, one other question that, is there residential planned for the property?
Sorry?
Is there residential planned for the property? No.
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay, just, it was curious, again, Strong Denver gave a letter of support because it offered residential, which seemed contrary to what you're applying for.
So someone noted the same thing at Planning Board, and I think that we don't really control like the letters that we receive, but I think that
Sure.
It's a pretty new RNO for what I understand. So I think that we need to, we talked about it in Planning Board, that we need to do some outreach for them to better understand what the project is.
Got it, okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much, thank you.
And that's the problem with standard zone districts, is that you can get residential in a mixed-use zone district. That's happened on Tennyson, it's happened on Santa Fe, it's happened on Colfax. So even though the intent of this zone district is mixed use, that's not always what ends up playing out in our city. So we have a motion by Councilman Herndon, and we have a second by President Torres. Seeing no other comments or concerns, we will see you in front of the full body at City Council. Thank you all for your time today. There's several consent items. If you have any questions, feel free to contact Luke and I. And see no other business before us, we stand adjourned. Thank you.